So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this lab talk on the future of work. I am Fabio Sgaragli, and I'm the head of innovation of FEGB. It's the Jacopo Brodolini Foundation. It's a European think tank, who is the lead partner of the partnership leading this project called the Laboratori Aperti, Open Innovation Laboratories, which I'm going to tell about in a minute. This lab talk is promoted by the Open Laboratory of Ferrara and co-promoted by other 4 open laboratories, which are Ravenna, Forlì, Piacenza, and Modena. So before introducing the topic and the speakers and the guests for today, let me just speak briefly about this project of open laboratories, because it's a very interesting project financed by the Emilia-Romagna region. It's quite an ambitious project, as it has funded the revamping of 10 post-industrial buildings in 10 different cities of the Emilia-Romagna region, with the purpose of creating centers for the education and training of citizens at large, but also in particular younger people, people at school, but also older people, on the potential of the digital transformation and the impact on the job market and the potential for enterprise creation. So I think the mission of the laboratories is very aligned with the mission of these lab talks, which we are organizing online given the coronavirus emergency. We tried and organized a series of talks to actually explore some of the issues that we usually talk about in person during the events that we host at the laboratories. You can follow this talk live here on Zoom for those who have registered, but also live on Facebook on the Facebook page of Laboratorio Aperto Ferrara. So if there are still people that you know that might want to hear what we're going to talk about this afternoon, you can share with them this live Facebook, which is happening right now on the Facebook page. So let's, before I actually introduce the topic, let me introduce our 2 guests for today. So we have Jeffrey Brown, who is also a dear friend. I mean, we've been knowing each other for a few years. Jeffrey works for the Bertelsmann Foundation North America, and he leads project and thought leadership, so the production of thought leadership on a number of issues, but in particular on artificial intelligence and the future of work, which is exactly the topic of this afternoon's talk. And more broadly, Jeffrey is interested all around, I would say, on the impact of technologies on international affairs. He's been managing for the Bertelsmann Foundation a very interesting research on the impact of digital transformation on the labor market of local communities, on cities, and in particular on some North America cities, which is going to share with us this afternoon. Stefano Besana works for Ernst & Young, has been digital organization strategist for the past 14 years. He's been involved in a number of projects dealing with the digital workspace, digital transformation, social business strategy, brand reputation. I mean, the list is very long, and both of them are lecturers and speakers in a variety of Italian and international events and schools and universities. So I think we are in very good company this afternoon to explore this topic of the future of work. But let me just introduce very briefly the topic. So we all know that we are living in the digital transformation era. I mean, this is a very general label describing a lot of different technologies converging and actually changing the very meaning of the term work and labor. I mean, we all read daily on the newspapers on the terrifying scenarios of a job market in which robots will steal jobs from people, and automation will take the place of human beings in dealing with all sorts of routine tasks. And there are some thinkers and also companies that actually see new waves of automation coming as technology advances, and especially artificial intelligence and the convergence of artificial intelligence and robotics, which will slowly but surely in the next maybe 10 or 20 years transform even more the nature of labor the phase of the labor market. And actually, we will, there are some that see these very, dark scenarios in front of us in which a lot of people will get out of work, out of the labor market, as new and more intelligent machines will be able to perform more sophisticated tasks, will be able to perform and take roles that today are just in the mind of those working on those technologies. Now, is that true? And what are the plausible scenarios moving forward? And what can we do today to actually not be so terrified by the impact on technologies on the labor market, but actually work to slowly lead the labor market and the people in it, transforming the way they integrate with technologies, the way they deal with technologies, and the way they prepare for maybe more sophisticated tasks for them. So the way that we organize between the three of us is for Jeffrey to introduce some findings from their research, and then Stefan and I will comment and ask a few questions, and then we slowly integrate in the conversation the point of view of the private sector. So without further ado, Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fabio. Most appreciated. First of all, thank you for the invitation to present some of the research that we've been doing across the Atlantic on how the future of work, technology, and automation is impacting local labor markets and how cities, counties, states, regions are responding to that. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview of some of the different research that we've been doing. It's a very, very short presentation of case studies, giving the rationale for why we focused on the future of work in cities. And then I would love to absolutely hear from Stefano about some of the planning that you've been doing from the private sector's point of view when it comes to the future of work, because those are points of view that are included in these case studies. In fact, those are some of the stakeholders that we spoke to. So with that, I am going to share my screen and I'm going to go through, let's see here. I hope this works.
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Bertelsmann Foundation, we are a transatlantic think tank headquartered in Washington, D.C. We focus on a variety of digital topics, always from a transatlantic perspective. So we have a project looking at democracy and technology. We have another project that looks at trade and digital trade and technology. And of course, there's this project, which focuses on how technology and automation are changing the world of work, and then the workforce aspects of artificial intelligence. So why did we decide to focus on the future of work? Well, one of the reasons, and this is polling that comes from the United States, is that 77% of Americans, was a Pew poll that was done back in early 2018. 77% of Americans thought that robots and computers will be able to complete many of the tasks, many of the jobs currently done by humans. And so in the aggregate, 77% of Americans said this is something that is going to affect us by the year 2035. On the other hand, when they were asked individually whether or not technology and automation would have an impact on their personal jobs, only 30% of Americans voiced support for that statement. So this means that there's a big gap between what people think will happen in the collective and what people think will happen to them individually. And this is maybe why we haven't seen more policymaking around the future of work, either at a national level or at a very, very local level. We often don't see citizens going to policymakers, mayors, governors, regional officials and saying, technology and automation is something that we need to be planning for. What are some policies that we can do? What are some policies that we can create to make sure that we are prepared to take advantage of technology and automation? So because we're a think tank, we decided that we would focus on this topic and try to catalyze a public debate This is an infographic that we released at the foundation about 2 years ago at this point. And basically it shows all of the different global estimates for millions of jobs that would be gained or lost due to technology and automation. And so, as I'm sure that some of you might be aware, there are estimates that say that, dystopian estimates that say that various countries around the world, such as China, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, will lose hundreds of millions of jobs by the year 2030 or the year 2034. However, there are other estimates that say that technology and automation will actually lead to the creation of many new jobs and many new tasks. And so this infographic was meant to portray that, in fact, there's contradictory information that's being thrown out by governments, consultancies, and it's leading to distortion among how policymakers should be planning for the future of work. This really charts how our approach to the future of work has evolved over the past 4 years at the foundation. From 2016 to 2018, down in the lower left-hand corner, we focused on national comparisons between the United States and European countries, so Germany, France, Spain. And then we also did a series of webinars with the International Labor Organization on how international institutions could start planning for the future of work. Starting in 2018, we started to actually take a look at how the future of work is being applied in the American office. So artificial intelligence is being applied to not only design the office of the future, but it's having an impact on data collection in the office as well, and has massive privacy implications. And from there, we moved into more of a local bent to our work, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. How we took this national and international level research and then tried to filter it down to the local level. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you can actually see what we're planning in the future, and those are our current projects, so the 100 Questions projects, and then moving more into data-driven responses to the future of work, which I'm happy to go into detail about at the end of the presentation. So why did we decide to focus on the future of work in cities? Well, in the United States, and I'm sure Italy as well, cities and regions have the power and, perhaps more importantly, the convening capacity to bring people together to create inclusive future of work solutions. In the United States, responsibility for workforce and economic development is already heavily devolved to states, cities, counties. The federal government, so that being the Department of Education and the Department of Labor, are often in charge of large pots of money, which then they distribute to states and cities as grants. But when it comes to policymaking itself, it's actually states, cities, and counties that are in charge of creating their own workforce policy, their own economic development policy, and we believe their own future of work policy. We decided to work in 3 cities in the United States. And this is, these are actually numbers that come from a study that was done by the University of Redlands. It's located in California. They looked at regional vulnerability to technology and automation across the United States by the year 2035. And they highlighted 3 cities, 3 metropolitan areas that could potentially be particularly vulnerable to technology and automation. And so those are Las Vegas with a forecast 65.2% loss of tasks by 2035, Riverside, California, which also happens to be my hometown, at 47.6, and then Orlando, Florida at 61.8. And I should mention that I know that many of you are, of course, paying attention to the news and the impacts of COVID-19 on local labor markets. There was recently a study that came out 2 weeks ago that was produced by the Brookings Institution here in Washington, D.C., that actually found that Las Vegas and Orlando, Florida, will be some of the most impacted communities in the United States economically from COVID-19. And it's because their workforce is heavily oriented towards the service sector. So in Las Vegas, that's casinos and tourism. In Orlando, it's Disney World, Universal Studios, and the entire service ecosystem that comes along with those industries. And of course, many of those people have been furloughed from their employment. And so one of the approaches that we'd like to take going forward is working with these communities and trying to figure out how they can think about the future of work and how COVID-19 is affecting the future of work in their communities. There were two goals to this project. The first goal was to increase awareness among local level policymakers that the future of work is a challenge that they should be planning for. And that doesn't mean necessarily listening to job loss or job gain estimates put out by the media, but it means that they should be starting local level future of work conversations in their community, working with people at all different levels in their community to try to find out how these global forces are going to shape local economies and local workforce. The second goal for the project was to try to get to the point where we could create concrete strategies for these communities to take advantage of the future of work and be prepared for the future of work. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. This is just a small grouping of people that we spoke with in each case study. Each case study involved convenings that were carried out with the National Association of Workforce Boards here in the United States. And we basically did convenings of between 100 and 150 leaders in each community. And this involved workforce officials, civil society, businesses, labor unions, high school administrators, economic development officials, universities, and we got everyone in a room and we did a short presentation on how technology and automation is forecast to impact their communities. And then after that, we engaged in community level dialogue, stakeholder discussions on how these stakeholders thought that technology and automation would impact their community. These are actually illustrations that were created as part of the project. They're intended to represent the lower left-hand corner is my hometown of Riverside, California, and in the photo you can actually see warehousing, which is located in the upper right-hand corner of the photo. The vast majority of job growth in Riverside City and County over the past 5 years has been in warehousing and logistics, which is forecast to be some of the most disrupted by just basic automation by the year 2030. Las Vegas is over in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and then Orlando is in the lower right-hand corner. And up in the left-hand corner, we actually have Bari, Italy, which is one of the case studies that we're still working on completing, but there is an Italian case study that has been included as part of this project, seeing as that it is a transatlantic project. So instead of going through each individual case study, I just chose one that I thought might be applicable to the Italian context. And so when many people think of Orlando, they obviously think of Disney World and the impact of service jobs, low-wage service jobs. But Orlando is also a center for advanced manufacturing. And so between the city of Orlando, which is located in Central Florida, the local policymakers are building out a connection to the Space Coast, which is where the Kennedy Space Center is located. And so there's actually a lot of opportunities for advanced manufacturing to blossom and develop between downtown Orlando, which you can see in the center of the screen here, and then the Space Coast, which is located out towards the right-hand side of your screen. So local policymakers have really been engaging in thinking about creative ways of taking individual workers who maybe started off working in an amusement park or in a hotel or in a restaurant, and thinking about creative ways to upskill and retrain those people for higher level opportunities, better paid opportunities in advanced manufacturing, because that is really the growth industry in Orlando at the moment. So during the community level conversations that we had in Orlando, stakeholders voiced 3 challenges that they were struggling to deal with. When it came to the future of work, the first was there's a transient workforce in Orlando that cycles through employment at many of the different amusement parks, restaurants, and hotels. Not many people know this, but there are about 250,000 people employed in the hospitality sector in Orlando. Florida is also a very, very low tax state. So there is 0 income tax that the state of Florida levies on worker income. So that means that many businesses and many workers are drawn to the state of Florida because they pay no taxes. But then it also means that the state has fewer resources to pour back into the retraining, the reskilling of workers who may need guidance in doing that. And then third, there is an aging workforce in Orlando and in Florida more generally. It's a state where there are a lot of retirees moving, but at the same time, there are many new arrivals that are coming from Puerto Rico or other parts of the United States. And so there's a gap between the aging workforce, the baby boomers, that in many cases have been at their positions for 30 or 40 years and are going to soon be retiring. They're high-skilled workers, and policymakers in Orlando highlighted the need for that aging workforce to be able to train these new arrivals, which in many cases come from immigrant backgrounds and are just starting off in their careers, in many cases in low-wage service jobs. At the same time, they identified 3 core strengths that might be useful in guiding the future of work for Orlando. The city has a very, very high quality of life, which is in part because of the weather in Orlando and recreational opportunities. Even if you do not necessarily have a college degree or even a technical background, you can move to Orlando and you can find employment in the service sector. And so this was the promise that policymakers had made to workers, is that you might not be able to find a high quality employment opportunity in Orlando, but you can find a job and you will be able to support your family and pay for an apartment. And third was community involvement in advanced manufacturing. And so there are large anchor employers such as Lockheed Martin, Disney, employers at the Space Coast such as SpaceX, which are demanding workers that are proficient in advanced manufacturing. And community colleges and technical schools in the area had been working to build up very, very rapidly certification programs in, for example, mechatronics. If you go to the website and you look at the case study for Orlando, there actually is a video where we interview some of the mechatronics students who had come from, I think, working on a golf course and were taking an advanced mechatronics degree to try to get into an advanced manufacturing position. We also proposed 3 core solutions for policymakers in Orlando. First of all was strengthening talent pipelines between service sector workers, hotels, hospitality, amusement parks, and opportunities in advanced manufacturing, in modeling and simulation, opportunities with more career advancement and higher wages. We also suggested that policymakers in Orlando forge a specific future of work plan for the community, and that's currently in progress. So the local Chamber of Commerce is actually building a future of work plan for the region around Orlando. It's 7 different counties. And then third, we thought that it was incredibly important, after speaking with workers in Orlando, oftentimes they're not aware that they can engage in retraining, reskilling when they're in their late 20s or even in their 30s, and they have a family and they have a career today. We thought that it was important for Orlando to communicate with frontline workers in hospitality, in amusement parks, that opportunities are available for retraining, for reskilling, and that they should take advantage of those opportunities. So the third recommendation was more of a communications exercise that the Workforce Board and the Chamber of Commerce could engage in. Since we've published all of these case studies, there's been a wide reach of this work. We've either done webinars or we've been cited in a number of different organizations across the United States. And all of these organizations are curious to know more about how local areas can engage on the future of work, how they can be developing concrete plans. And finally, I'd just like to thank you for listening to my presentation of the Orlando case study and why we decided to work on the future of work at a local level. And with that, I'm happy to go into greater detail on any of the case studies, Las Vegas, Riverside, and then what we're doing going forward when it comes to data-driven responses to the future of work and the 100 Questions Project. So with that, Fabio, I'll kick it back to you.
Great, thank you very much, Jeffrey. Of course, there is it's such a complex issue that we could talk probably a few hours over each single case study, but I think that it sparked, at least in my mind, a few considerations and questions, but I would like to give the floor to Stefano first.
Thank you, Fabio.
Remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Fabio, and thanks for inviting me. So I found that the research and the insights that Jeffrey presented very insightful and very interesting, especially on a couple of dimensions. Took some notes while Jeffrey was talking. One is about I'm seeing the perspective from the private sector. Work with a lot of organization, a lot of large public and private organization. What I'm seeing right now is that there's a lot of hype around the concept and a lot of interest around the concept of future of work. But what I found interesting and the point of view underlined by Jeffrey is the fact that future of work is deeply connected with the future of cities and future of society, because it's not just a matter of how we organize the work, how we have an impact on organization, on people, on work actually, but it's more broadly an impact on the broader society and the things that we can organize together, and the impact that we have seen and we will see probably on our cities as well, and our ecosystem in general, not just organization. But the first thing that I want to underline, which is in my opinion very relevant, especially given the fact that we are living in difficult times, and what we are seeing right now is that the impact that organization could have on the broader society, from public to private sector, is very huge and would be very much bigger in the future probably. So the thing is that reflecting on future of work is nowadays going beyond some labels and some fancy labels, or going beyond the hype, and really focus on what it matters because when we are discussing about future of work as it's something important for the whole society. And at the beginning of our presentation, there was a very brief reference to the data-driven mindset. So talking about data today is once again another thing that we are seeing very recurring in a lot of species and a lot of works that we are doing with private sector. But once again, it's just the label. But I think future of work, future of city is deeply connected to the use, the positive use. And I would like to understand and give some discussion on this, given the fact that Jeffrey and Fabio has per their experience, the role of data in building a future of work society and a future of work broader concept. Because I strongly believe that building data-driven mindset, data-driven culture is not so easy, and it should start probably by investing more, not just on technology, but also on the culture behind data and the use of data that we can do in terms of building the real future of the world. So this is just one of the first suggestions that I would like to put on the table, because I think it's, as per my experience, what I've seen in the private sector, the role of data and the role of the organization in shaping the future of cities and the ecosystem, it's very relevant, and it would be more relevant probably in the future.
Thank you, Stefano, for these first remarks. I think the notion of how data can help us to, if I well understand your point, the way that data can help to have better policy on one side, because they help policymakers understand better the way reality and the reality dynamics, not just of the labor market, but of a lot of different layers of society, from very simple things like, mobility within a city, and then on top of that, the times in which a city lives and shops and has fun, and on top of that, the kind of the kind of approach the citizens have in enjoying the city, and so on and so forth, is actually one of the key elements of new policy making and new policy design. So the ability to draw out data and draw intelligence out of mapping the way the city as complex systems work can help certainly to understand what are some of the touch points that you can use as a policymaker to make things better for the citizens. And on the other side, of course, within single organization, you mentioned companies, surely there is a big drive in getting data, not just, from customers or prospects or potential customers, but also, the way that flows of materials and information come in and out a single organization and link to, link to the suppliers, link to the stakeholders, link to the customers, can help to make more and better informed decisions. I think therefore that a culture of data is what is badly needed. I agree with you. This COVID emergency is actually showing all the limits of the way that we capture data and the way we deal with data, and we make intelligence out of data. And I think that, we are paying dear consequences in some countries more than others. I don't know, Jeffrey, what does this provocation of Stefan about data-driven culture bring to you?
Well, I think that it's a great question, and obviously coming from the private sector, I think that they're ahead of everyone else when it comes to not only collecting data but making sense of the data and then letting that drive decision making within their lines of business. From my experience, policymakers at a very, very local level want to have more informed and data-driven policymaking. And in the case studies for Las Vegas and Riverside, that was actually one of the key wants from policymakers, was how do we go beyond just looking at an unemployment rate in my city or my county, and how do I actually forecast how technology and automation is going to impact citizens' work, jobs, but also housing, transportation. How can we build a plan, and how can we build policymaking that is not just short-term, looking at 1, 2, 5 years from now, but how can we use data, and how can we be collecting data at a local level to say, maybe we shouldn't train tens of thousands of workers or 50,000 workers for careers in logistics and warehousing, when the companies themselves have told us that they're introducing robotics, they're introducing Industry 4.0 as a way of automating their operations. And so actually one of the future projects that we're working on is we found that in many cases, policymakers are not asking the right questions when it comes to the future of work. There's an incredible amount of confusion with policymakers confusing technologies and then confusing their impact on local areas. So I just wanted to share very, very briefly this this new project that we recently launched with New York University. It's called the 100 Questions Project. So it's there are many different domains to the project itself. There's gender, there's migration, there's disinformation, but Bertelsmann is working on the future of work domain with the GovLab at New York University. And the idea is to bring together a community from around the world to say, what are the core future of work questions that we should be asking, because we don't believe that we're having a good quality public debate around the future of work. And so we're at the point where we have a bilingual community at this point of stakeholders from around the world. And what we're doing at this point is we're sourcing questions around the future of work from these bilinguals. And then following the sourcing of questions, there will be a ranking of questions and ordering of questions. And then there will actually be a data science exercise to say, these are the 10 key questions that we've identified. What are the data sets that exist to answer these questions? And then what are some innovative data science methods that we can use? How can we bring big data to bear to actually solve these future of work questions and have a more data-driven future of work policy discussion?
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. We will be curious to learn about some of the findings out of this as well, Jeffrey. We might reconnect in the future on this. Stefan, I had a question for you. If you don't have any comments on your own, I just had a question that I can.
No, I have it, but we'll see how the discussion it goes. But not on data, but another dimension that I would like to underline on the future of work. I think it's interesting and was underlined by Jeffrey in his speech. But we can maybe talk that later. If you just go on to the questions, it's okay.
Okay, because Jeffrey mentioned, I mean, there is a lot of nuances around the debate on the future of work. Of course, the impact of technology varies if you look at South America, or if you look at North America, or Europe, or Asia. It varies if you look at, logistics, or if you look at education, so it's more complex than this. But we can probably make up, as I said at the beginning, two basic scenarios. One scenario in which a lot of jobs will disappear because they will be automated. And therefore, the question is, are we going to have, new jobs coming into the labor market? And the other scenario, which says that, yes, a lot of professions and jobs will be automated, but they will still need some human capacity to manage and interact with technology. So I wanted to know, from your perspective, Stefano, if you are in, between these two scenarios, one of the two, you have a third one?
No, I agree. I mean, the thing is, it's complex. It's related to what I would like to underline, and it gives back to my previous question. So data is one dimension, but the other one is about skill and covering, because one of the most interesting, I guess, part that Jeffrey has shown was related to the shift that we will probably see into the jobs of the future. So once again, it's not just a label, it's not just a fancy tag to name things, future of work, and it's not something as it's been depicted. So everything would be replaced by automation, everything would be replaced by artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of noise and rumors about that. But what I think it's peculiar, and I'll take an example as things that we are running. So everyone has spent, I guess, 10 years, 12 years, the last 10 years, more or less, talking about digital transformation. So, and once the transition, once the things have moved from digital transformation to the effective proof of what is digital transformation, the things is that a lot of people and a lot of things have understood that we were not yet prepared. So what I'm seeing in terms of what companies are asking and what companies are building in terms of their digital transformation path in the private sector is that they were not able to understand and to, not all of them, most of them were, but not all of them were able to cope with this situation. So scenarios like the smart working, scenarios like the remote working, scenarios like the activation of collaboration tools to make it possible what we are doing today was not possible, and the fact is that technology nowadays in 2020 is perfectly able to cover all the aspects, and automation will be more present in the next few years, and in artificial intelligence and machine learning, all that kind of stuff. But it's a matter of also giving intentionality in terms of the skill that we will build, which means that to see a real shift, the shift should be intentional. So what I'm seeing in the future of work and in transition and in digital was the same for the last few years, is that the companies that have succeeded in terms of the things that they can build were the companies that were able to be intentionally change their skill, their mindset, their culture, their technology. Whenever the intentionality, the intention to change was not so present, we have seen some roadblocks, some barriers, and some obstacles to change. And I think it's the same, getting back to the question you were asking just a few minutes ago, it's the same. It's a matter of being intentional on what we build and bring intentionality to the game, in the sense that we need to drive the change. We need to be as the captain of a ship, by giving direction, by measuring, by using data to understand where the change is going, because it's not something that will happen in a blink of an eye. It's not something that will happen quickly or without any potential huge change in the society, in organization, in the way we would work. But it's something that we can definitely understand, foresee, and orient in the direction that we want that it takes. So
I think that's a very interesting comment, Stefano. So the notion that the future of work will largely depend on the intentionality that we will apply as policymakers and as single organizations, and all the ecosystem around work, which is also made of, training organizations and education system, families, of course, and the attitudes and the vocations of the young people that have to be aware about the shift in the labor market, and have to be aware that, to find a place in the future labor market, they will have soon, as early as possible, to start thinking and reflecting around what they want to do in their lives and what kind of skills they will need to get into the labor market. So this intentional shift is something that, as you rightly said before, data can help to emerge, but it's also a matter of political leadership, in my point of view. So I wanted to go back to Jeffrey and ask if in their research, they've noticed what kind of difference can political leadership make in transitioning the labor market and in accompanying this future of work development.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and we've actually seen the impact that political leadership has on the future of work here in the United States over, I would say, about the past year, and it's even accelerating with the COVID-19 crisis that Europe and the United States and the world are dealing with right now. And so in the communities that we worked with, Orlando, Las Vegas, and Riverside, we were trying to be a neutral convener for a future of work conversation. And again, we were trying to, first of all, have a fairly low bar and say, let's have a community conversation about the future of work, because this is one of the things that's not being addressed at a local level. And so we held these community conversations. And then since then, we saw that these communities, either the Workforce Board through their strategic plans, or the Chamber of Commerce through their strategic plans, have built the future of work into the plans. They've built specific future of work documents to guide their workforce and economic development planning. And then after that, we saw that states across the United States, governors, started to build future of work task forces. And so the states that we're advising at the moment is Washington State, California, Texas, New York, and Florida, all of which have created future of work task forces that are intended to have community conversations, stakeholder dialogues, and then move all of those recommendations into actual legislation. And then just finally, one last thing, with the COVID-19 crisis, you of course see even higher level political leadership, and this is presidential candidates that are talking increasingly about the need for social safety nets, an emphasis on what a good job actually means. In the United States, does it mean having health healthcare, paid time off, basic social protections, and then perhaps most controversially, universal basic income. And so you see higher level political leadership, taking COVID-19 and the workforce and economic impacts of this crisis and extrapolating that into some of these future of work domains that have today been very theoretical.
Okay, I would like to shift back the same question to Stefano, because intentionality and leadership in trying and shape the destiny of local communities when against the backdrop of the dramatic changes in the labor market that we can foresee. As you have rightly said, is a matter of getting as much intelligence as possible, looking into the future rather than in the past, communicating with stakeholders, with the communities, trying to facilitate the process. What about in a single organization, Stefano? Is that the same thing, or is that something more difficult or easier?
Yeah, it is pretty much the same thing, in the sense that there is a huge literature also in terms of the power of communities and informal communities in organizations. I've been dealing with communities since a few years, and I have some stories to tell about the power of the community. But it's the same. I mean, the communities that we are seeing in multiple sectors and in multiple ways of dealing, not just with organization, but in the private sector, in the public sector, in the personal or any other fields that is an impact on our life. The power of the role of communities are always something which is able to differentiate the organization or the concept that have a success also in difficult times. So the thing is that a community is not something that occurs spontaneously in organizations. So the difference between what Jeffrey was saying and the story for I would say the broader the cities or the whole societies, that organization has some roadblocks and some quite factors that could complicate the things a lot in terms of culture, in terms of dynamic of command and control, politics, a lot of politics in the organization, a lot of willing to control and to have an overview of all the things running. It's something that we need to change, of course, for the future of work. So the power of communities and the power of taking a term from the agile methodology, which is the role of the guilds. Guilds are some layers, invisible layers that could connect people from one room, one silo to the other, branch of the company or whatever it takes, or whatever else. So the thing is that guilds or communities are something more intangible, something informal, something which is not always visible in terms of visualizing the interaction between an organization. So if I see the organizational structure, I may not be aware of the whole things running in an organization, since the organization are just like human beings, right? Any living being, in terms of interaction that it can get, in terms of the things running in the organization, running in the things that are inside an organization. So communities has a huge power in building and bringing value and enabling value from each single individual inside an organization. But it's not something that we can build. It's not something that we can build in one day. It's not something we can just activate, as some organizations, in my experience, have done. So they just came to me and say, okay, we have activated a community. We have activated this kind of tool. And so automatically people will collaborate and will work together, and we will project the future of work and work on the things. It's not something that will occur spontaneously, at least in organization. It could occur spontaneously, but to be effective in organization and to link these communities to business objectives, to what we want to achieve, and to direction and the purpose that we want to achieve, because at the end it's a matter of purpose of the organization. We really need to build, and we really need to build these communities by starting from the people, the needs of people. So why people are getting together. On the outside world, it's easy because it's a matter of interest, it's a matter of passion, it's a matter of all the things that you can imagine. But in organization, it's kind of different. We can connect each other on a interest basis, but if you're able to link the power of collaboration and the power of communities to the purpose of the organization, that's like the bingo, because we are having people that are engaged, that are working together and pursuing a common purpose, and that will have an impact on the happiness also of the employees, but we will also reflect, as we perfectly know, taking care of your employees, taking care of the well-being of the company will also reflect on the customers. So it will also have an impact on the customer. And I would like to say that you will also have a deep impact on the whole society, not just the organization itself. So I think that the future of work will be intimately connected to communities and to the power of bringing people at the center of the business, like things and like what we are seeing in this difficult time.
This calls for another question that I have, because in this whole debate or reflection on the future of work, there is again, maybe a dichotomy between those who think that in the future we will, workers will need more hard skills than soft skills, and on the other side, some that actually think the opposite, that we will need more soft skills than hard skills because the hard work will be done by machines. So I wanted to elicit from the two of you, from your knowledge, experience, and own reflections, what do you think about this dichotomy? Is it there, a dichotomy, a trade-off, or actually something different? Jeffrey, Stefano, whoever wants to.
The thing, in my opinion, is that also the label between art skill, soft skill, when it comes to reality, it's not so important. What we need is its competencies and skills, which are able also to adapt and to be effective and the context, which means that it's not something that we can build and we can create from scratch. Competencies will be different. So each organization has spent a lot of time, as per my experience, given the underlining the power of collaboration, underlining how effective will be smart working, how effective will be. But what we have seen with the COVID-19 is that the tremendous change that this disruption had brought to life, it is something that is unprecedented, and it's something that we have never seen before, and it started accelerating like in a chemical reaction. It's accelerating everything. And organizations started understanding that the skills they have are probably not sufficient, and a lot of them are starting to get back to the basics. So we start discovering that maybe organizing a webinar like the one we are doing right now, or participating in a workshop in a virtual firm, is not that easy. But a few months ago, we were discussing about virtual reality, automation, and things about everything will become virtual. You can virtualize everything with your smartphone and things like that. But it's not easy, because we missed the link between theory and I guess what is a practical application of the skills. So what I would like to underline is not a matter of just focusing on hard skill, soft skill. We should probably get rid of the labels. We get rid of it's useful for literature, for studying, but once like that, it's like learning to play piano without having played piano, just studying on notes and the things like the music you can study on the books. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. So what we do is probably understand the skills that we require. And in this sense, the data could lend us a huge hand in terms of understanding what we need what we will need in the future, but without having without losing this contact with the reality. So we don't risk to build skills that are soft skill, hard skill, meta skills that we will never use in the future. So what I think is that we need to be effective. We need to be and to build tangible skills that could be useful in the working scenario.
Thank you, Stefano. Jeffrey, would you like to try and respond to my question as well?
Sure. So I like your question, and I think that it's not an either or question. So do we need more soft skills or do we need more hard skills? I think that probably you often hear policymakers that say all we need is people focusing on like one technical skill, or you know. And I think that going forward, the real value not only for workers but for resiliency in communities is going to be mixing those two. And so if you have a hard skill and you can combine that with soft skills, then that's automatically going to give you a boost and help you be resilient to technology and automation. And it won't just help you be resilient, it will help you take advantage of new technologies, because you'll be able to combine the hard skill and the soft skill. And I think this is why we hear a lot of consulting firms, especially, talking about the need for the melding of the two, and more of a focus on, I guess, capabilities and resiliency. And I think that the COVID-19 crisis shows us the need to bake resiliency into everything that we're doing, whether it's public health or workforce. And one of the ways of doing that is melding these two things together, which to date,
Jeffrey, you're breaking up.
Different, but complement. Apologies.
You're back.
At least it happened. At least it happened the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, surely we will need in the future is more band for sure. Okay. Before we get to the closing, I just have a very quick last question for the two of you, to which I would like a very quick response. With all you know and all you have seen, are you more optimistic or pessimistic about the future of work, and why?
So that's a nice question. I mean, I think I'm not the one or the other. I think I'm realistic. So I'm seeing I hear a lot of organization and a lot of discussion about the future of work. So in a sense, I'm optimistic, because I see there's a huge space, you know, for building things and for doing interesting things. But I would like to move from a more realistic position in saying what I've been saying for basically the whole webinar, which is really focusing on what it matters and really focusing on the change, on a profound and real change that we need to build. Also, a lot of organizations, and just to wrap up and close, a lot of organizations are starting to say me or asking me, so you've been working you've been a prophet of smart working and remote working or virtual collaboration for quite a few years. Do you think that finally organization will start in implementing this thing as the new usual, as the new normal, no? When the emergency will end? I think it really depends, and it's not so, you know, mandatory that they will just switch, because switching a mindset will require a real transformative experience. What we are living right now is it's a tremendous chance, and what we will live in terms of automation, in terms of the things running, will be a tremendous accelerator for the future of work. So in a sense, I'm optimistic, but I'm also well aware that the change, it's not just sufficient to bring the change, but we need to be more reflective on the change and to interpret the impact that it has. If we go that way, I will be optimistic that the advantages for the whole society will be huge. If we don't go that way, I'm not pessimistic, but I will say that will be just a flavor we have done. You know, you remember when we tried that couple of months of smart working where everyone, it was just an experiment, no? It's just like a demo. But to move from the demo to real facts, you need to be reflective and to develop also some meta competencies to reflect on what you're living.
Great, thank you, Stefano. Jeffrey?
I'm very optimistic because I think that we're in the early days of planning for the future of work, and new transformative technologies are being implemented at a rapid pace, but still we're in very, very early days of the implementation of new technologies. And the reason that I'm optimistic is that you see when you go to local communities and you talk to people working at a workforce board or a worker in a labor union or, you know, a local business, that they're capable of problem solving really, really difficult situations, and that policymakers are willing to take on the challenge for planning for the future of work. There just needs to be this critical mass there needs to be this critical mass of, you know, implementation of technology, or I guess economic pain, to get them to plan and to get them to forecast what the future of work means for their communities. But I think that when I first started this project, I was pessimistic, and now I'm optimistic because you see all of the different models, all of the different community dialogues that are happening, and it really gives you hope for them being able to overcome these external challenges that are being thrown at them by technology and automation. So the externality of technology and automation is there, it's coming, but community level dialogues and their capacity to problem solve are what make me optimistic about our ability to plan and survive and thrive.
Thank you, Jeffrey, which you know, translates in one of the quotes I like, which is, the more I train, the more I get lucky. So the more we know, the more we might be able to do something about it. So great. Thank you so much, Stefan and Jeffrey, for sharing with us your wisdom and insights. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I do. And I also hope you know, the participants enjoyed it too. Just before we really close, I just wanted to anticipate that we have 2 talks coming up. Very interesting, one on 15 April on building creative communities, which links back to one of your comments, Stefano, if I can make this connection. And on 1704, technology for sustainability, which again, you know, not all technology counts for bad. So with that, thank you again very much, Jeffrey and Stefano, and good evening to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Fabio. Good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.